Peace, peace. This is King Kashmere checking in on the Fly Fidelity podcast with my man Luke. You know what I mean? Just chopping it up about the album to end all alien abductions. Enjoy.
First I say, what we're going to do. Then you say, I don't know, what do you want to do? What we're going to do, what you want to do.
I have an idea.
You're going to dig this.
The Fly Fidelity podcast is the solution.
It's the best.
Check it out.
You want to get super fly.
Details just ahead.
Do you love
credible content,
but hate
how long you have to wait?
And who wants
super thick and frothy dumpster juice with rat corpses in it?
There's a better way.
Fly Fidelity.
Fly Fidelity.
Fly Fidelity.
Fly Fidelity.
Fly
Fidelity.
Fidelity.
Fly Fidelity podcast.
Fly Fidelity, baby. Fidelity, baby. Fidelity.
With your host, Luke Bailey.
Welcome to the program. On this very special season finale, we're joined by King Kashmere to discuss his latest release, the album To End All Alien Abductions. Enjoy the conversation.
Yo, it's 1:45. Look up in the sky and peep the light show. Oh, eyes glow like a apophis. Hype, tight flow, fiber optic, hot shit. The system lord is in the cockpit. If the key maker's a thing, then I'm the locksmith. Yeah, iller than the architect. Marked for death, living with a heart of stress. Thinking who the evil queen's gonna target next. Yes, stress. I saw them in the back room, ARG, looking for daisies, but they can't see. I'm right in front of you with an old AR3. No escape, no doors, more sailor.
Why don't we start with the name of the release? Why the album To End All Alien Abductions?
Well, I mean, obviously, over the millennia, alien abductions have been a real problem for the human race. So I thought, you know what? Now is the time to put my foot down and let them know it's over. Do you know what I mean? And that's really it. It's really my service to mankind. Do you know what I mean? It's needed. Someone needed to step up to the plate, and that person was me, accompanied by Alex DeLarge. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, you've been warning us about aliens since you released The Aliens Are Coming in 2004.
Yeah.
Was there any catalyst or specific moment that pushed you into thinking about a direction for this project?
Well, I put it like this. This album it's interesting because I said it before. When I came across Alex's music, it kind of resonated with me in a sense of there's a lot of people that wear the boom bap sort of banner, or the thing that
Right.
Everyone talks about, they do boom bap. Everyone talks about the 90s, this and that. Right. But a lot of the time when I hear the music, and this is obviously no disrespect to anyone in particular, but, whenever I hear the music, I think, yeah, cool. You chopped some breaks or whatever, but it never sounds like what they're claiming. Do you know what I mean? It's maybe a new version of what they're claiming or whatever. But when I was listening to Alex's music, it literally took me back to when I was 13. You know what I'm saying? It took me right back to the early 90s. So with this album, I saw, when I was listening to the beats, I sort of saw an opportunity to make the album that I've wanted to make since I was a kid. Since I was a kid at home, listening to Max Alex and Davey J or DJ 279 on the radio back in the day, that's the album this is the type of album I wanted to make since then. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, so it's kind of like spiritual in a way, because it kind of took me back to simpler times. You know what I mean? It gave me that feeling. Like a lot of the time when I make music, it's based on the feeling that the beats give me. You know what I mean? So, jumping ahead, for example, my next project is with a producer from Brighton called Cuff, and I'm calling that project Sounds Like Home, because when I was listening to his beats, as I've gotten older, right, where I grew up is becoming more and more important to me. Do you know what I mean? Like, as I was growing up, I never really thought of things like that. it's like kind of like wherever I was is wherever I was. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But as I've gotten older, where I grew up has become so important to me. I think about it a lot. Do you know what I mean? And the sort of vibe that area and my peoples give me. And when I was listening to those beats, it kind of just gave me that feeling of that area. I could close my eyes and just think of that. So I say all that to say, you know, I'm very motivated by the music that's in front of me. I'm definitely not a rapper that is motivated by necessarily words, really. Do you know what I'm saying? It's you know, if there's no music, there's no bars, basically. Do you know what I mean? With me. So yeah. So to answer your question, the motivation was literally the music that Alex put in front of me. Do you know what I mean? And then everything sort of fell into place from there. You know what I mean?
What makes this album so special is that it's almost an album out of time, but
yeah.
on time. It's also an album very much on time. And I was wondering, what is it about time and your intentions of breaking it that works for you as a writer?
I think well, I can picture like this. Like when I do get creative, I tap into the times that I felt music the most, right? And those times were times past, right? But the thing is as well, I always, because I exist in now, do you know what I'm saying? I think that as much as I, you know, tap into times past, I'm a very self-aware person in that sense. I know where I'm at, but I also know what I love as well. So I think the time, you know, the sort of play off of the past and the present, not even necessarily the future, but the past and the present, you know, play into how I make my music. Do you know what I'm saying? It's you know, it's a mindfulness of not only just like current events, but how things move. Like movement changes over time as well. Even if you look at music, right? If you look at hip hop music, from say, let's say the movement of the music, the actual patterns and the way it moves and the way it affects you,
right,
had changed between, let's say, the mid 80s even up to the late 80s, and then the late 80s through the 90s. There was all the way it moved was very different, right? So like, for example, you know, a lot of people sort of might comment on how in the mid 80s people would use a lot of drum machines, for example, right? People would use the TR-808 or the DMX drum machine, right? And they'll program stuff in a certain way, right? It's very electronic, you know what I mean? A lot of people like to talk about analog stuff, but it was all electronic, right? And then when we started using samplers and stuff, right? The emphasis became more on it being funky. Do you know what I mean? So if you remember in the late 80s and through the early 90s, the primary goal was to be funky. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And no, that's not even necessarily sampling funk music. It's just more like the rhythm of it or the attitude, you know, the rhythm and the attitude combined, right? And I believe that a lot of that is to, you know, a lot of that has contributed to why people loved it so much. Do you know what I'm saying? And then if you think about from the 90s on through the 2000 up to now, that, you know, there's a lot less of an emphasis on the music being funky. Do you know what I mean? So with that, a whole different attitude towards the music is born, right? I feel like because it's funky, because it's less funky, I think people are a lot less. I don't know. I feel like this might be a thing people might disagree or whatever, but I feel like people are a lot less in love with the music than they used to be. Do you know what I'm saying? Like I remember growing up, and you know, just you bringing up time, it's just making me think of different time zones and stuff. But I remember growing up, being into this music and this culture. You know, it was completely just, you know, you were just lost in it. You're just completely submerged in it. Like your whole life was based on it. Do you know what I'm saying? How you interact with people, who you was looking out for, and all this kind of stuff. Do you know what I'm saying? But like now it's less of that. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like people are less in love with it. Do you know what I mean? And to a certain and to a certain degree, because it's people aren't as in love with it, and that's kind of leading it astray a bit. And I'll never be the one to say, to try and tell people how to make their music, but I notice these things, and these things don't you know, these things are not necessarily what, you know, what people are thinking of when they're sitting in front of the equipment or anything like that. But I do feel like, you know, that has contributed. So yeah, you know, time affects everything. You know what I mean? Where just, you know, it's kind of, I always found that fascinating, how, you know, as human beings, we just go through different zones of time where, you know, it's almost like the physics are different. Do you know what I'm saying?
Take me back for a second. You mentioned people not being in love with hip hop as much as they used to be. Where does it start from you? When did you fall in love with the culture?
So let me think now. So growing up, I'd heard little things, you know, you hear little bits and pieces on the radio, but it wasn't until, I'm trying to remember if it was the summer of 1990. So basically what happened was I was in Nigeria for my grandmother's funeral, basically. And I was out there, but when we came back, I came back with one of my cousins who came to live with us because he was going to start, you know, start his life in London, basically. So we came back, but the important thing about that is that he came back with about 3 bin bags full of tapes, right? And what would happen is he got a job at the Nigerian embassy. So, you know, he was just like, you know, not at home. And then eventually on the weekends, you know, he would go and see, I think, his girlfriend, who later became his wife, basically. And so basically I had free reign of his collection. So obviously I used to just raid his collection hardcore. Do you know what I mean? And then the thing is, he had a pretty mixed bag, right? So he had like you know, a lot of New Jack Swing stuff in there. You know, he had just different stuff in there. But the one thing that really caught my eye was this super multicolored tape, right, by a group called De La Soul, called 3 Feet High and Rising. Do you know what I'm saying? So prior to that, I just heard bits and it was like, yeah, cool, you know. But when I heard that album, that was when I became interested in, like, it's almost like the penny dropped. Do you know what I mean? It became music became, you know, it sort of changed from something that was on in the background, because my parents used to play, you know, around the house. They used to play James Brown. They used to play David Brubeck. They used to play Michael Jackson, off the wall stuff, you know, all that kind of stuff. Right. And, you know, my brother and sisters-in-law, they used to play a lot of stuff like Shalimar and all this kind of stuff around the house. So there was music, but it was always stuff in the background. When I heard 3 Feet High and Rising, then I was like, holy shit. Do you know what I mean? What is actually going on here? Like, all the sounds were like just grabbing my attention, and just my you know, just
it changed everything.
Yeah, it changed everything. It captured my imagination as well. But what solidified it was when I actually heard Tribe Called Quest's first album. I know a lot of people talk about Low End Theory and all this, but the first album, People's Instinctive Travels on the Path of Rhythm, when I heard that album, that was when I was like, all right, I'm gonna actually try this now. Do you know what I mean? Because at that point, the combination of 3 Feet High and Rising and People's Instinctive Travels that just locked me in completely. And I was like, first of all, I was like, these guys, I was intrigued by the fact that they were almost talking, but even then I was noticing the patterns in how they were doing it. And that funkiness, what we was talking about earlier, that, that got inside my soul, basically. Do you know what I'm saying? But then not only just that, but it was a case of I was hearing the sounds, I was hearing the sound bed that they were on as well. And I started to become intrigued with that. Like, how are these sounds being made? Like, what is this? Like, why am I liking this so much? Do you know what I mean? So I'd say, yeah, native tongues, discovering native tongues was the beginning of me falling in love with this music. Do you know what I mean? For sure.
Yeah. Fuck your branding. Give me knowledge, wisdom, understanding. Give me the true and living, not the vision of a phantom. Save the world, the mission was abandoned. And now the mental prison is expanding. Dark shit, mankind has got his hands in. The madness to turn your hair white and make your cap spin. They contaminate the theory of delf to worshiping yourself, worshiping material wealth. How pathetic. Humanoid greed is now genetic. And how to get it is your only concern. Who's broke, who's rich, who's fucking your bitch? Who got thrown under the bus or under the bridge? Who stays silent when the powers that be cancel the legend? Except for the small handful of brethrens. Yeah, look at this life, learn its lessons. Think about the creator and learn its presence, the essence. The essence. I wanna revive my life force. The essence. I wanna live life and learn lessons. I wanna go back to the essence. The essence. The essence. I wanna go back to the source. The essence. I wanna revive my life force. The essence. I wanna live life and learn lessons. I wanna go back to the essence. The essence. The essence.
What is it that Alex Delage pulls from you? What is it that he pulls from you that makes working with him so special? And what have you learned about collaborating with somebody as rare as Alex is? We're talking about a producer who doesn't cut corners when it comes to quality, knowledge, and execution. Very much, energizing qualities to be around for an artist like you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think with Alex, I think what he's brought out of me, especially for this album, was remembering how to enjoy the process, right? So again, his beats were resonating with me so much. And I've worked with so many people that their beats, fully resonate with me, but this was a bit different because of, I guess the sound bed he was putting together. But, he brought out the enjoyment. Because again, now that I think about it, a lot of it probably has to do with the fact that it reminds me of these early things that I used to listen to. You know what I mean? Because I mentioned those Native Tongues album, but in those earlier days, another thing that my cousin did, right, was he used to just fiddle around with the radio a lot, right? So my cousin from Nigeria, he wasn't even born in London, he found Choice FM. I think Choice FM Choice FM, I don't know if you know about that, but it was a South London radio station, right? It was a legit, so it was a legit station. I think at the time, it was 1990, so I think they had just become legit, right? And he found 279's Friday Night Flavors. And he was like, yo, there's a rap show. Oh, you like this music? There's a rap show on Friday night. You should check it out. And literally, after the first time I listened to it, I was completely obsessed. I would religiously check out 279's show on a Friday night. And then eventually, just because of my cousin's influence of just looking through the radio, I found Max Alex and Davy J on Kiss, right? So all of those things that I was hearing on those stations, I was completely in love with, right? But as I was growing up and stuff, and then eventually was doing music and stuff like that, I'd met a lot of great producers, but no one that was doing that kind of shit. Do you know what I mean? So when Alex came along, I started to hear stuff that reminded me of those times, you know? Because you have to understand, like, when I was tuning into the hip hop radio of the time, like, I had to be there. I could not afford to miss a show because I would just miss some dope shit. You know what I mean? That's how influential it was for me. So when I started, hearing sounds from Alex that was reminding me of that, it just brought out the kid in me again. And it was almost like, okay, oh, yo, okay. And also as well, it's not even just that he was making those beats, right? He actually understood the essence behind it as well. So we would have a lot of like conversations just about stuff, about stuff that we liked, or oh, yo, the way he got the drums sounding on this was crazy, or oh, yo, the way he filtered that sample was dope. These type of conversations, and also finding out how he knew about this or that thing, or I might put him onto something, or he might put me onto something, just enhanced the enjoyment of the process. Do you know what I mean? Because I felt like I was dealing with someone that I was on the same page with. Like, do you know what I mean?
There was a lot of common ground.
Exactly, man. Exactly. And yeah, so it was very, like, for example, when I do Strange You stuff, I love that too. But that's a whole other process, and it's actually kind of harder. Do you know what I mean? Because me and Zygot, we're going for a specific thing, and there's like a certain things we let do, certain things we don't. But with Alex, there's a lot more free. There's a lot more room to experiment. He's like me in a sense as well. Like I might record something to one beat, but then I might be like, let me try this on another beat or whatever. And he was like, he's like me in that sense. He's like he'll start messing with a song that I've just recorded, and I send him the vocals, but then he'll be like, let me try a different beat. And then he'll send it to me, and I'll be like, yo, that's even better than the original. That kind of interaction, I love that shit. Do you know what I mean? Like that to me is like the epitome of collabing with someone, collaboration. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? When you can have that back and forth, and you're just firing, and you're both excited about the thing. Do you know what I mean? It definitely brings out a sort of childlike glee. You know what I mean?
There's a synchronicity attached to that process, isn't there?
Definitely. And it's not everyone gets it, but I was grateful to have that on this album for sure.
So what was the beat selection process like? Did you already know the concept for the album before you went through the beats, or did it come to you when you were listening to the production?
Yeah, it was really, everything just really came from the production, man. Do you know what I mean? Because the thing is, like, Alex is, at the time was quite prolific, and also, with beat making, but then also he had built up a huge library of beats. So, like, I got tons and tons and tons and tons of beats, right? So I guess from going through them all, I was like, right, okay, I can make this type of album, sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? But it wasn't, in terms of like a concept of what the theme was or anything like that. Nah, I kind of like when I hear like a range of beats, I kind of like feel like, yeah, this is the vibe that I can be on, but there's no solid concepts yet until we get like 3-4 songs in. I mean, it's like that with when I'm writing an individual song even. Like I'm not an MC in a typical sense where, I wake up in the morning and I'm thinking of shit to rhyme together or a concept or something like that. Do you know what I mean? It's what will happen is I always say I'll need a beat that makes me feel crazy, because I guess it's like, I haven't got the words to describe what it is, but there's a certain feeling when I hear a beat that I can write to, and it conjures up a feeling in me. And then what I'll do is I'll start writing, and then usually, and I won't have any sort of idea. I won't be like, right, this is going to be about this. I'll start writing, and usually by, a couple of bars in, a sort of thing starts happening, like, oh, I might catch a phrase and I might be like, that's interesting. And I go down that road, and then the sort of meaning sort of like forms along as I'm writing it, sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? And I guess that, that can be said for the whole process of putting the album together, really. It's really just, it's always just a case of, the beat conjuring a feeling inside me. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And then it just goes from there. And it's always a feeling that I can't necessarily, if I got that feeling now, I wouldn't be able to describe what that feeling is. I just have to act on it, basically. Do you know what I'm saying? And then I guess, the universe will give me something. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So how long are you typically sitting with a beat before it starts talking to you? And in the case of this production specifically, are any of these beats challenging you?
Nah, I mean, it was all pretty immediate. Do you know what I mean? It's I kind of know. There's never a time that, sometimes there's a thing where I might get a beat from someone, I might not see it at first. Do you know what I mean? And then later down the line, I might be like, oh, yo, you know what? That one there. Do you know what I'm
Right.
saying? But yeah, no, I don't. No, there wasn't anything that I had to sit on. It was very much, and that feeds into the sort of like enjoyment part of it, because it wasn't anything that I had to, it wasn't anything that challenged me in the sense of, this is like super weird. How can I get my head around this? Do you know what I mean? There's nothing like that. It was all very.
It was meant to be.
Yeah, exactly. It was all very immediate. It all just fell into place, really. You know what I mean?
Do you remember a specific moment making this project where you thought, this is starting to come together? We got a musical style and vision. Was there maybe a line off top that you remember, maybe a song or a beat that sort of set this pace and sparked an energy between the both of you?
Well, I think because the whole process kind of started when we put out these two singles. We put out
That's right.
we put out Soul Caliber and North Star. So initially we weren't even supposed to be doing an album. We were just going to do a few songs and a few singles and then just see where it went. But because Soul Caliber did quite well, HF were like, yo, you guys might as well kind of do an album, right? But I think we had those two songs, and then the next song we did was actually House of Cards. Do you know what I mean? And we was thinking about doing that as a single. But I remember once we had those three songs, it was kind of like, you know what? Yeah, there's kind of like a path forming here. Do you know what I mean? So I would say it was when we did House of Cards, and we look back on it all as well. Yeah, House of Cards, yeah, for sure.
Dope. How long did it take you to put it together?
Oh, the album took about, I don't know, I'm trying to think now. It's kind of like a year and a half kind of process.
Okay.
But it wasn't we weren't making stuff the entire time necessarily. Do you know what I mean? I think I could say, if my memory serves, and I'm old as fuck, so you know what I mean. But basically, I think we pretty much, I think we started in the top half of last year. I think was it last year? I can't even remember when Soul Caliber came out, but yeah. And then I think if I was to give it a solid timeline, I'd say it took maybe about 6-7 months of actual, writing and recording and shit like that. And then after that, it was, going through it all, you know what I mean? Maybe adding bits here and there. So yeah, I'd say it took about a solid 6-7 months of actually making it. And then the rest of it was like mixing, getting artwork together, etc., etc. So yeah.
Let me ask you, where do you consider this among your projects? Because to me, this might be the one. This might be the best King Kashmere project to date.
Yeah. I'd say so as well. I'd say so. Do you know what I mean? Because I put Strange You in a different category because, it's, the Strange You thing is it's a group thing, right? Do you know what I mean? It's not like how me and Alex are. Me and Alex are two individuals who came together to do this thing, whereas Strange You is like a solid group. It's like, do you know what I mean? What's it called? Like, in terms of my output as Kashmere, do you know what I mean? I think that this is definitely my best shit. Do you know what I'm saying? It's definitely my most enjoyable. And it's weird because with this one, like, there was a less of an emphasis on trying to impress my peers with my flows and shit like that. That kind of mentality. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it was less of that, and it was more about vibing. Do you know what I mean? And I think it definitely worked out for the better, because I'd always struggled trying to. Because you know what? As much as I love, there's certain MCs that I love that have got complex shit. Like, I was chatting to you before about people like Sir Menelik, people like Godfather Don, et cetera, early Chino Excel, stuff like that. And I love all that shit to the core, do you know what I mean? But there's also another side that I love, which is the native tongue stuff, the large professor stuff, the more like straight down the line type of MCs. And I've always struggled trying to find that balance of things not sounding, because there'll be times when I'm like, oh yeah, do you know, I just want to come with more simpler styles or whatever. What's simple in my mind, because I think in general my flows and that are pretty much straight down the line, but I guess the mechanics of it in my head are sort of determine whether I think it's more complex or not. Do you know what I'm saying? But
right.
But like, yeah, no, like there was less of an emphasis on trying to be a super MC. You know what I'm saying? It was more like, right, find that balance of not sounding basic, do you know what I'm saying? But having a more simplistic approach to it. Do you know what I mean? So I had to learn a lot about making sure I'm picking the right words, do you know what I mean? And stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? But in the same sense, it was quite fun to do that. Do you know what I mean? It's like word placement. People don't even really think about that kind of shit. You know what I mean? But like for me, in my earlier time, right, when I was doing all my earlier stuff, right, I hadn't really understood about any of that shit. Do you know what I mean? I was kind of just going off whatever I thought I'd picked up. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
I didn't really understand the mechanics of flows or, shit like word placement or word selection. Do you know what I'm saying? And yeah, it's since doing Strange You, that was one of my biggest things, because before Strange You, I'd stopped doing music for a couple of years. You know what I mean? And I always said, like, if I come back to doing music, I've got to be better than I was before. So that started off my journey of sort of like, actually really studying. Do you know what I mean? And figuring out how to do it better and more properly. Do you know what I mean? And I think a lot of that came to a head on this album. Do you know what I mean? All the stuff that I'd learned over the years about it, at least to me, showed up on this album. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about those qualities showing up on this album specifically.
Yeah.
What are some of those practices from your foundational years that you hold on to most tightly as values, I guess, still within your work ethic today?
Well, I guess earlier, the stuff that I take with me from the earlier times is, definitely holding on to the idea of being creative. Do you know what I'm saying? Because the thing about it is that I think a lot of rappers these days, like, they don't want to explore their own imagination. Do you know what I'm saying? It's more to do with, this cool word here or there, or, or what's actually going on in their immediate vicinity. Do you know what I'm saying? And for me, I've always been the type of person, especially when I was younger, to lose myself in someone's album. Do you know what I mean? Like, I always felt like I was there in whatever environment that was, that I thought was being sort of conveyed, I felt like I was there. Do you know what I mean? Especially, I mean, and that was the case with all the albums that I got into, but especially, you know, albums like, like Dr. Octagon and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? It's like, that was really the time I identified, losing myself in an album. Do you know what I'm saying? So when so I always take that with me, because I think that I want that for the next younger dude that might be listening to my shit. Do you know what I mean? I want that person to be able to lose himself in the album, go take himself to another world. Do you know what I'm saying? Because like music for me has always been an escapism thing, man. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I've never looked to music to necessarily inform me of what's going on in the world. That's cool. That's accepted and all that. And that's, I love that, but that's not what I look for in music. Do you know what I mean? I just want to just be taken somewhere else, man. Do you know what I mean?
Well, you're a comic book head too.
Oh yeah, hell yeah, definitely. So, and that feeds into it as well. It's like, it's just worlds, man. World building. You know what I'm saying? I love all that shit. You know what I'm saying?
I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I'm doing it big, doing it large, doing it sick. I'm doing it big, sharp as a razor, dark as a Vader, graft the body parts of an angel. You can't spar with Azazel, fatal. They wanna talk business, but they get part of the table. I'm a black pterodactyl. I ain't the one to put crack in the pipe or crack in the capsule. Never the one to fake jacks on a mic, put that in a manual.
Never the one to fake jacks on a mic, put that in a manual.
Back to the rap skill. Tell me, why do you worship the skeleton holders? Why the hell do you do this shit? What will it take to bring heaven in focus? Open a doorway, malevolent hocus. Incoming, degenerate jokers. I'm going on. Turn up the volume into the red. I'm going on. Dread like predator's head. Dread, killing the irrelevant dead. Severing the elephant's head. Severing. I'm sick, better get me the relevant meds. Damien Dark. Damien Dark.
You mentioned Dr. Octagon. One of the constants in your evolution as an artist has been this ability to pivot from one universe to another and live out these alter egos.
Yeah.
It goes without saying, it's this real value that you've been able to reinvent yourself essentially with every alias under the music you've made over the years. Do you have a favorite alias?
Let me think now. In terms of, I'd say my favorite alias that I can think of off the top of the dome might actually be Galactus, actually. Do you know what I'm saying? Because that, I mean, I think it was cool because at the time, when I was making that album, that was a time when I was really getting into that character, actually. Do you know what I mean? And, even though the album, weirdly enough, the album wasn't even directly about, like, I wasn't lifting stuff out of pages or anything like that. It was more of like a mentality that I sort of like just lived with throughout the whole time of doing that. Do you know what I mean? And doing that album. And that was another album that was kind of interesting to make. And working with both Dr. Zygo and Jazz T, you when you're working with dudes like that, you're in absolute safe hands. You know what I mean? Because like these guys, like they know their shit. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So I guess I'd say that was cool because as well, with that album, it kind of, there was certain element of it where I could just let my nuts hang and just talk my shit. Do you know what I mean? So that's probably my favorite Alias, yeah, for sure. You know what I'm saying?
What about this album? Let's talk about this interest in sci-fi and specifically Silver Age comics. What kind of roles do they both play in stretching your mind as much as your style and going beyond your form?
Oh man, you know, it's vital. I mean, like you want the thing I really love about comics, you know, is the sort of the writing, man. It's kind of like, you know, like the places that they go with the writing, it's just it's just mind blowing for me a lot, you know, a lot of the times, man. I mean, because you know, I quite like, you know, obviously I love all the fourth world shit, you know what I'm saying? All the Jack Kirby, you know, all the Apocalypse stuff, you know, Dark Side and all these guys. I love the I suppose what I love in comics as well. I love when they deal with gods. Do you know what I mean? Because when you're dealing with gods, man, it's just sort of like it becomes less of a universe and more of like an omniverse. Like, do you know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
just like it's huge. And then when you start when these when you start reading these things and seeing where they go with some of their stories and stuff and their ideas, it kind of like leads you into sort of your own musings and you know, that's what it's done for me, you know, because a lot of the time I'd read something or whatever, but then in during my day I'll just be daydreaming about that shit, do you know what I'm saying? And then, you know, forming my own sort of worlds or, you know, just ideas and stuff like that. So yeah, it's definitely instrumental in expanding my mind because it's just so mind blowing, man, and just opens you up to just different paths of thought. Like, do you know what I'm saying? But yeah, yeah, I'd say they're absolutely vital. And then, but then, like, also, I think what I do dig is sort of like my favorite comic book character of all time is Superman, right? And the thing about Superman is, you know, I feel like that's a character that's largely misunderstood because a lot of people are just like, well, he's just a Boy Scout flying around, and it's so much more than that, so much more than that. Like, do you know what I'm saying? And what I find interesting is, you know, the way they write the character is like a character that's got such colossal levels of power, right? But his moral standing is so solid, yeah. It just can't be. It's very difficult to take a character like that off his path, and I think that's amazing. I mean, we're talking about a character that can literally shatter the planet that we're standing on, right? But yet and still, because he is so fundamentally good at his core, yeah, he's like almost uncorruptible. Do you know what I'm saying? But another side of that character, which I find interesting, is sort of the fact of like, yes, this is a force for good, yeah, but at the same time, yeah, don't get it twisted, right? Because if he gets taken off this path, it's curtains for everyone. Do you know what I'm saying? And I find that to be quite interesting. It's like in equal measures, inspiring and terrifying. Do you know what I mean? I love shit like that. Do you know what I'm saying?
We're talking about duality, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, that's what I love about Zack Snyder's take on Superman, actually. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, the guy gets a lot of criticism for his take on characters, which personally I don't understand. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I think that there was a very good job done of showing, because, you know, we have to understand, like, the Richard Donner version of this character,
Right.
right, had everything laid out before him, right? He came to Earth, cool, but when he came of age, right, he got to stay in the Fortress of Solitude, yeah, being taught lessons by the AI Jor-El for 7 years before before he came out to the world, right? So he had already studied all the knowledge, the entire knowledge base, the Kryptonian knowledge base of the 28 known galaxies that they had explored, right? He was taught Kryptonian level science, right? He was taught how to use his powers in many different scenarios, right? Everything was laid out. So by the time he got out there, where was the journey? Do you know what I'm saying? With Zack Snyder's take on it, it was more like a real world thing where it was like, right, if I show my true nature right now, I'm going to end up in a lab. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's interesting because like you can look at Jeff Johns' Flashpoint, right? And you can actually see what would happen, when if this guy doesn't land in Smallville and get picked up by the Kents. Do you know what I'm saying? So actually, the threat of being becoming a lab rat is extremely real. So you're looking at it from a real world perspective of these people that are, this couple that are extremely and rightly so, worried about letting this guy come out into the world until he's ready. Do you know what I'm saying? And then on top of that, when that time does come where he has to go and find himself, and he, finds the scout ship, like I'm talking about a Man of Steel, when he finds the scout ship, he literally gets a day, until the military guild Kryptonians, like Zod and all these guys show up. Yeah. Now he's got to take his day's worth of learning, right, and somehow save the planet from being terraformed into a new Krypton. And I was looking at that, and I was looking online at all of the criticism. People were talking about the destruction porn and all that. And I'm like, you guys are like missing the point here. Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's like, and I find that the case with a lot of his films, people missing the point. Like even with Batman vs Superman, people talk about the idea of Batman killing, right? Missing the entire arc, missing the point of the entire arc of Batman in that film. The point is the guy was in Gotham City for 20 years, and that Gotham villains are nightmare villains. Do you know what I'm saying? And he's been dealing with those guys for like 20 years. And what happens is he puts them away, they come back, kill more people, and the cycle keeps repeating. He even said 20 years in Gotham, how many of the good guys have stayed good? Criminals are like weeds, and the thing about it, and I think the thing that pushed him over the edge to get more brutal was obviously the killing of Dick Grayson, right? And a lot of people are like, oh, you shouldn't have done Dick Grayson, you should have done Jason Todd like the comics. But the truth is, Jason Todd's death would not have had the same effect for this storyline on Bruce Wayne, because everyone knows Dick Grayson is almost like Bruce Wayne's adopted son. Like, do you know what I'm saying? So the idea was that this pushed him over the edge. He's had enough of these guys. He's gone on a brutal rampage, right? And the whole idea was how he's going to come back to to himself. Do you know what I mean? People were talking about, but then instead people were talking about, oh, he's branding people. He's doing. I mean, like Batman wasn't killing people in that. You have to understand, right? So you got a criminal organization, right, who have military grade weapons, actually beyond military grade weapons, because they were designed by Lex Luthor, right?
True.
So if you have a bunch of nightmare criminals with military grade weapons, someone throws a grenade at you, if you then throw a car at them and they don't move out of the way, well, boy, do you know what I'm saying? It's like that. and then beyond that, it was like the nightmare future where literally dark side had taken over. So you have literally a nightmare future where most of the planet is under the anti-life equation. Superman is under the anti-life equation. Everything is chaotic. I was thinking to myself, hold on, you're worried about Batman shooting people. Would you like him to karate chop parademons? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Do you think you could take out Darkseid with a roundhouse kick? Do you know what I'm saying? I think a lot of the time people just lose, they miss the point, of things, but yeah, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about all this stuff. But all of this stuff feeds into what I do, basically. So I guess that's why I'm so passionate about it.
King Kashmere is in the holy hour.
Yeah. Coming back from the slime, the sentient void lurking in the back of my mind. I'm rising from a savage decline, an unknown force tingling the back of my spine. Returning to the light, am I even the same? A negative energy follows me to keep me insane, informing every breath I take, every move I make, every mistake, every rule I break. Am I alive if I live like that? Am I alive if I thrive in the midnight black? Got me thinking about my life, should I give mine back? Did I sacrifice living for a thing like rap? Witnessing the devilish rise, it's all tiresome. Trying to bring death to your lives, all 9 of them. Your soul's got the flame on it. Got a one-way ticket to hell with your name on it, You need to fall back, slow it down a little.
Take your time.
Yeah, turn the frown upside down a little. You need to fall back, slow it down a little.
Take your time.
Yeah, turn the frown upside down a little.
When you think about all of those career-defining sessions during those formative years of defining your craft, what was the project where you felt stability as an artist in terms of being able to master your own universe?
That would have to have been the Strange You LP 4080. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that was that album. I mean, that whole Strange You process, actually. But when we got to that album, I think that was it. I think like the process of what you're talking about, of me sort of like mastering things, started with probably EP 2040, actually, which was our second EP. But definitely, and there was a lot of things that happened in between, but by the time we got to that album, I was like, okay, right, this is, this is the point now where, I'm not gonna look at this and cringe into a ball, you know what I mean? Cringe into fifth dimension, like, do you know what I'm saying? It's like, do you know what I mean? It was, that was the one where I was like, okay, right, I feel good about this, you know what I mean? And even now, when I look back on it, I'm not like, oh, I wish I didn't put that out, do you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, it was definitely that one, you know what I mean?
Got it. On the first song on this new album, Angel Strike, you say something to the effect of, you're trying to open a box. I'm curious as to where you think you've grown the most, striving to break that box with this album versus the other albums you've released in the past.
Well, I'd say like I think on this album, I was more authentically myself on this album, which is something that I haven't done on most of my other albums. When I say authentically myself, I mean like literally, even talking about certain aspects of my life in a direct way, you know what I mean, which is something I never did back in the day. I mean, I'd always sort of like I'd always sort of like mask it in some sort of like reference of some kind. Do you know what I mean? But like with this album, I was really just being me. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it wasn't a character. It wasn't anything like that. So I guess it was the honesty with myself. Do you know what I mean? Which is which is what I'd use to sort of crack open the box. Do you know what I'm saying? Right, mask it up in something else. Do you know what I mean? Or try and subvert it in some way. It's just authenticity, man. I think that's one of the sort of biggest internal themes for me on this album is the authenticity. Do you know what I'm saying?
We were talking about Alex as a producer, of course. We've been talking about his contribution to this project. When it comes to rapping and producing yourself, how do you evaluate yourself as an MC versus being a producer?
It's interesting because I know this is going to sound weird, but I actually don't really see myself as an MC. You know what I'm saying?
Really?
It's kind of, yeah, no, I don't. I really don't. I see myself as more of a musician. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So, you know, and that can encompass making beats or, you know, or writing stuff down. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's kind of like, I mean, for me, the beats are the most important thing. I'm more into beats than I am writing lyrics. Put you like that. Do you know what I mean? So, although I approach it in a sort of similar way, I guess I approach both of them in a sort of similar way. I think that when I'm producing, I find that I can zero in a lot more when I'm producing. Do you know what I mean? On certain vibes, because I feel like when I'm making music, when I'm making beats, you know, I think there's a lot more that I have the capability to manipulate with. Do you know what I'm saying? So many ways you can go with it, and so many things you can do to just create different moods and things like this. Yeah. So that's an interesting question, man. You know what I mean? I find writing more of a, like, I notice writing more than I notice when I'm making beats, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? When I go, you know what I mean? When I go into making beats, it's just a flow and it's just a thing, like, just, I don't know, I can't really describe it. It's just like a it's just like a, I don't know, man. It's just like an ebb and flow, I guess. I don't know. And I can't really, and then by the end of it, I got something. When I'm writing, it's more of an, you know, it can be more of an agonizing process, really. Do you know what I'm saying? Because, you know, words are different, I guess. You know what I mean?
It feels like there's a lot to be said about the strokes you make as a lyricist with, you know, you consuming as many comics as you do. It feels like there is a distinction with the way your words flow, the same way a comic strip might flow in sorts, if that makes sense.
That's interesting. And that's actually a huge compliment. So big up for that, man. Do you know what I'm saying? But yeah, I mean, you know what? It's one of those things where I may not notice that I'm doing that. Do you know what I mean? Because comics are, you know, a pretty significant part of my life. So you know, I guess I haven't put two and two together regarding that. Do you know what I mean? But that's good to know. You know what I'm saying?
What's going on? If you are still listening to this episode and enjoying the podcast, why not become a patron of Fly Fidelity at patreon.com/flyfidelity. Becoming a patron means you are directly supporting our show and helping us to create a new episode each and every week. It also means that as a thank you for being a super supporter, you'll be able to access exclusive content to you, including patron updates, offers and discounts, a monthly secret podcast, early access, and so much more.
As a kid, I was always a big daydreamer. Do you know what I mean? My mind would always wander off somewhere else. Do you know what I mean? And just think, you know what I mean, about stuff. You know what I mean? Think about different scenarios. Think about possibilities and stuff like this. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, that's really what it comes down to in the writing, man. Do you know what I mean? And a lot of the stuff that I, you know, in terms of comics and stuff like this kind of feeds into it. Like, for example, you know, I'm a huge fan of Grant Morrison, right? So Grant Morrison, as you may well know, relies heavily on a lot of sci-fi elements. Do you know what I'm saying? And a lot, he loses a lot of people. I'm not there with them. I quite dig it. Do you know what I'm saying? But yeah, a lot of that stuff sort of like contributes to some of the musings, man. You know what I'm saying?
Were you watching any films while you were writing for this album?
No, I wasn't watching any films during this album. No, I'll tell you what I was watching. I was rewatching Stargate SG-1. Do you know what I'm saying? Which is why you might hear a lot of Stargate references in there. Do you know what I'm saying? But yeah, no, I wasn't watching films at this time. No, I wasn't. No, I was trying to think. I may have been watching. Yeah, no. The only movie that I was watching actively was Zack Snyder's Justice League. Do you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Other than that, I was yeah, it was really SG-1. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So you didn't watch a network?
No, I didn't watch Network during the making of the album.
Got it.
Right. But I always remembered. Yeah, you know what? Like, I've just got this thing where, like, I maybe I'm a little nuts, but I love seeing someone losing their mind. Do you know what I'm saying? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and in that one thing that I took from there, like, it was so visceral, man. I was like, I'll never forget it. So I was like, I need to use this. And I was like, this is the opportunity. Do you know what I'm saying? Because funnily enough, right, that song, it was Damien Dark, had nothing to do with that. Do you know what I'm saying? But it just felt right, man. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's one of those ones, man. But yeah,
it just really speaks to the moment, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely it's definitely relevant, man.
What's the story behind the Hollywood skit with Flip Tricks?
Oh man, so so really what it was, right, was so I think I was just, I don't know what was wrong with me that day in the studio, but in my lab, but it was basically, I had the idea for the inside skit first, right? And I just had this idea of, like, maybe halfway through the album or something, I just lost it or whatever. So, like, so I'm doing that. And so I had to, I had the thought of, like, or I lost it, or maybe I was getting a little bit too carried away, right? And so I did do the skit, and then, like, Alex is on the skit, like, yo, this guy, I think he's off his meds or whatever, right? So when I said at the end, so the whole idea of it was like, oh, look at this, I'm so carried away. Oh, we're getting out the hood with this one. Do you know what I'm saying? Alex is like, nah, you're bugging, right? So I'm like, yeah, let's go all the way with this. You know what I'm saying? I booked us tickets to Hollywood, etc. So then the idea was that, like, I've gotten so carried away, right? And then we end up in Hollywood, right? And then I've just basically jizzed all this money on whatever. Do you know what I'm saying? And we're stuck out there, and it's like, yeah, sheepishly have to call Flip Tricks and say, yeah, can you get us, please? You know what I'm saying? So I convinced Flip Tricks to act like he was pissed off at us and shit. And basically what I want to do is I want to have that as an ongoing thing through different projects, man. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, I mean, people got to know what we were actually getting up to in Hollywood, right? So keep your eyes and ears peeled. Do you know what I'm saying?
So the story continues.
The story continues. The saga continues, man. Do you know what I'm saying? But I mean, also, again, you was earlier on, you was asking about what I take with me from those earlier albums, and skits were a big thing, for me on albums. It kind of almost, it definitely helped transport you to whatever world that they were operating in. Do you know what I'm saying? Because it's like, it's one thing having the songs, but then to have this dialogue or activity outside of the songs, you know what I mean, just enhances the whole experience. And it was definitely something I wanted to channel for this album, man, for sure.
Yeah. Just gonna take a quick trip to Mars, you know what I mean? They told me meet him at Olympus Mons, you know what I'm saying? Let's go, you know what I'm saying? So like, yeah,
nice location.
Gonna go up there, you know what I'm saying? Got me like, you know what I'm saying? Got me a nice 40. Got me a blunt, you know what I'm saying? Gonna go get busy, gonna be up there chilling, you know what I'm saying?
Yo, who keeps the haters under manners? If it ain't King Kashmere, it must be brother Alex. I tell a hater suck a phallus. It's a street fight, our brothers under mad stress. Trying to figure it out, living in doubt. It's like I'm trying to swim in a drought. Infinite clout's a myth, I'm only here for a slice, but I'm destructive. I'm like the Lord Beerus of life. Manic, making noise by a tree. Former resident of a planet destroyed by a sneeze. It seems you enjoyed my defeat, now it's peak. Might wanna avoid my degrees. Yo, it's the God, don't forget that. Swerving the setbacks like Adam Strange with the jetpack. Unimpressed by civilian trash, I keep it moving till a brother sees $1 million cash.
Speaking of transportation, what can you tell me about 4000 AD? How does that come about?
So 4000 AD, we was already, so at that point, I think I'd already produced the Cocoa Bar EP for Renell 893 that came out on High Focus, right? And the thing is, Alex DeLarge actually mixed that project as well, right? So we were there and we was thinking about who to get on there. And Renell is just so dope, man. He's just so dope. Like, and the thing about him as well is that he sounds quite different to how everyone else spits. Do you know what I mean? He's definitely a very like solid character as well. So it was like, man, it just makes so much sense to get him on here. And Alex, you know, that was one of the things that was on, just on the millions of beats that he gave me and stuff. And it was just another one of those ones that was just really easy to do. Do you know what I'm saying? Trying to think of there wasn't actually, believe it or not, there wasn't a theme behind it. It was really just like, let's get busy, you know what I mean? And
right.
And literally that was it, you know what I mean? That sort of leans into the fun aspect of it, you know what I mean? Like of what Alex brought out of me, you know, of it not needing to be a thing. It was just like, look, let's just get busy on some raw shit, you know what I mean?
Solar Flare, that's an interesting track in that it features Verb T, who you're prior to doing this album, you're supposed to be doing a project with, if I'm right in saying that.
Yeah, absolutely.
How does that track come about, man?
So and that was like, what you hear on the album is like the third version of that, you know?
Wow.
Yeah. There was at least 2 other versions of that tune. But because that was the original thing that was going to happen when I first started talking to Alex. It was really a case of let's, all 3 of us do a project. But you know how it is, with like back in the day when someone was on a record label, let's say someone was on Elektra, right? They get a deal, they'll make their album. The way that the things used to run back in the day was, this person, they'll be in the studio for however long, they make their album, then they'll go on tour, then they'll come back, you know what I'm saying, make another one, etc., etc. It was very regimented like this. It wasn't, let's do collabs with 1 million other people, because everyone was under contract and stuff like that. So it was very straightforward down the line. But for us in the UK hip hop scene, we're constantly working on all kinds of different shit. Do you know what I'm saying? Some stuff doesn't even come out. Do you know what I mean? But with that, I think that's what happened there, really. It was really a case of, we was on board to do it, but then other things come on. I mean, like Verbs has got like 4 Owls and You know, I'm involved in, you know, all kinds of shit, God status, this, that. So, you know, so it didn't happen at that time, but we still wanted to obviously do the work. Do you know what I mean? You know, so yeah, it was very simple, man. I had the beat. I was like, and I think I did my verse first, and I was like, yeah, this is a vibe that Verbs would fit on, because we often, me and Verbs, we always talk about you know, we love like jazz influenced hip hop, man. We love that shit. Do you know what I mean? And we're all often always talking about it. So especially with the first version of the tune, it was like, you know, I was like, man, this has got Verbs written all over it, and he did it. Do you know what I mean? So he did that, and it was really just us two for a while. Do you know what I mean? Then it was more, then we started speaking about, should we get collabs on there? Who can we get? And it sort of moved onto the question of, should we talk to some people stateside and stuff like that, right? And then we spoke to, we tried to hit up a few people, but then Alex was like, do you know what? I was speaking to Mocha Only about something else. Do you know what I'm saying? Maybe we could talk to him about getting on there. And it was, for me, it was just like a hell yeah. I'd already said hell yeah in my head before he'd even finished the sentence, to be honest. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm a huge Mocha Only fan. That guy is ridiculous with it. And
super prolific as well.
Oh man, like he takes the word prolific and just takes the piss. Like, do you know what I'm saying?
Real.
I'm pretty sure that he's got more music than Madlib. Do you know what I mean? Which is actually an insane thing to say, but I think he might. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
So yeah, it was, and you know what, man? He was so like cool, man. Do you know what I mean? I couldn't have asked for a better interaction, man. Do you know what I mean? He was just mad cool, just good vibes, man. Just good vibes all the way. So yeah, I have to say that was definitely that's definitely a moment for me to actually listen back and hear, or look in my Ableton project and see a Mocha Only verse in there. Do you know what I'm saying? It was just wild shit for me, man. You know
it's a moment for sure. For sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Can you share any other examples of songs where they went through this big evolution, like you just said about this song? Are there any other songs that went through this crazy evolution?
Yeah, so we had Angel Strike. We also had Solar Flare. I'm trying to think what else did. There's a song called Limbo as well. That was a whole other vibe, because the beat that we had for that was probably even more minimal than what was on the album. Do you know what I'm saying?
Interesting.
And it was slower as well. I mean, even with Soul Calibur was not the original version. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, the original version was like some showbiz production. Do you know what I mean? It was like 80, 85 BPM or some shit. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it was like a mid-tempo sort of banger. But that's it. Over time, you're like, maybe we could try something else. I'm trying to think what else went through that. I'm not sure about this album, but I can tell you that I produced an album. I'm in a group called God Status, right? Our first project called Firmamentum, mate, the whole thing, I'm talking the whole project, went through about 4 phases. Talking like each beat, you know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't like, oh yeah, I rearranged 1 or 2. No, I'm talking the entire project went through about 4 phases. Do you know what I mean? And that was a good experience for me, because the good thing about doing it that way, because, okay, the reason why I do things like that, or me and Alex do things like that, is because back in the day, that's how things were made. Songs used to be developed back in the day. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it wouldn't just be like, right, here's the beat, here's your verse, goodbye. Do you know what I'm saying? It'd be like, all right, we got something here. We got the skeleton of something.
You'd experiment.
exactly, you'd experiment and you just build it up to what it is. Like a lot of the classic stuff that we listen to, that went through all kinds of changes and stuff before it became that solid piece of work that it was. You know what I'm saying? So, that is the mentality behind that. I mean, like as it stood, the first version of Firm Momentum could have probably gone out, but it was sort of my thing of like, nah, I can do better, and just kept developing it until it was something that we was like, we could be really, really proud of. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think that's a good way to do it. Not everyone's got the patience for that. Do you know what I mean? But it's definitely a way that I'll always work. Do you know what I mean? Not everything needs that, but it's good to recognize when something does need that. Do you know what I mean? Because there's a lot of people that feel like just because they've recorded it, that's it. Do you know what I mean? But nah, if you feel like there's somewhere in you, you will feel like there's room for improvement. You know what I mean? And if that voice is loud, you should definitely act on it, man. I feel you'll always have the original version. Do you know what I mean? But I encourage people. I mean, we're in the creative industry, so I'll always encourage people or nudge people to experiment a bit more and develop the ideas more. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Definitely. Thinking back over the creation of this album, what have you learned, and do you see an evolution in the way you've worked with each other in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I've learned to I've learned lyrically, at least, I've learned to not be so hard on myself necessarily. Do you know what I'm saying? Because anyone that knows me knows I'm my number one critic. Do you know what I'm saying? And I've kind of noticed that I've kind of realized that I don't need to look at it I don't need to look at things in a sort of negative way if I'm not getting the results. You know what I'm saying? Kind of just let it go and move on. You know what I'm saying? Which is huge for me. Do you know what I mean? Because it's something that I wasn't able to do before. Do you know what I'm saying? And just loosen up a bit and enjoy it more. Do you know what I'm saying? And look for things more. Do you know what I mean? Like look, like zero in and just try and make those small details bigger. That's something I learned from Zack Snyder. Do you know what I'm saying? Zero in on the small details and make them bigger. Do you know what I'm saying? So yeah, man. Yeah, it's that kind of stuff, really. Which was a huge thing because listen, man, for a long time I wasn't, music was beginning to feel like a chore. Do you know what I mean? Because I wasn't necessarily enjoying it. I was striving to do my best shit, but I wasn't necessarily like loving the process. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, that I'd say that's the main thing I've sort of learned is reacquainting myself with loving the process, man.
What's next?
So the next thing is there's a few things coming. Basically, there is a project with this Brighton-based producer called Cuff. I'm doing this project. Well, I've done this project with him called Sounds Like Home. Like I was saying to you earlier, it's a lot of the production was reminding me of where I grew up. So yeah, that was awesome to do. So that's coming out. I'm probably towards the end of the year. And then me and Alex have got another thing that we're kind of working on, Cash Alex and Friends, which is all produced by me this time. And it's EP format this time. And it's just us with some people that that we're feeling that are around us. Do you know what I mean? To do features and stuff. So that's fun. And then beyond that, there's more Strange You stuff coming, but it's quite different to what what we've done before. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of stuff that's like, from like 120 BPM to like 140 BPM. Do you know what I mean? On there. But it's all like quite it's all quite it's still Strange You, I'll put you like that. Do you know what I'm saying? Do you know what I mean? It's because that was part of the that's another challenge as well. That I've been going for as well recently is doing something at that tempo that heads can still dig. Do you know what I mean? Because a lot of people get repulsed by any sort of double time patterns or anything like that. Do you know what I'm saying? And I'm like, no, actually, how about this? Do you know what I mean? So that's what we're going for that. And then beyond that, there's another project that I'm working on, messing with this sort of similar type of tempos, but I'm bringing in some features from some notable grime MCs that I dig quite a lot. But yeah, it's very much still hip hop, but just 130 BPM. Do you know what I mean? I think it will make a lot more sense when people hear it. Do you know what I'm saying? I know some people now are probably running the streets going, no, 130 BPM. But when you hear it, you'll understand. You know what I'm saying? So yeah.
Infinity. In its simplest definition, it simply means without limit. It's not a destination, it's not a sign. We might have all first heard of No Limit from Master P in the 90s and his No Limit Soldiers.
Yo, they're telling me it's limitless. The flesh is weak, but the energy is infinite. Beginning's the end is the beginning. The snake eating its tail, the secret in the grail. The multiverse, John worlds and realms higher are in danger. For man-track vampires and hell's fires. Shadows cast over this reality. Walking on the hallowed grass, hoping for some clarity. The big bang to big crunch times infinity only enhances my abilities. The cycle repeats and hides the mystery.
I stand in awe, watching nature write the symphonies.
The figure 8 lays sideways, my 8 eyes blaze like Azrael's blade.
I wish I could show my appreciation for this
podcast.
I wish I could respond to it somehow, or be notified in the future when
Fly Fidelity
updates, because it's so great. But I don't think there's a way I can do any of those things.
Uh-oh, you're wrong.
Subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and SoundCloud and never miss an episode. Find us on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook.
My peoples, are you with me where you at?